Chapter 1, The Science of Psychology. The first section is the methods of knowing. There are different methods to know the world, and in this section, we'll explore and examine several methods discussed in the textbook. So, what methods do you use to learn things? For example, let's say that you are looking for an allergy medicine, and that works best for you. And maybe you are trying to decide which study method is better, like to study 10 hours a day before the exam or to study 30 minutes every day for several weeks. Or maybe you are angry because your health insurance denied your claims, even though you have been paying thousands of dollars each month. You realize that you don't want your anger to control your life, so you decide to find ways to reduce it. One option is to punch a punching bag for 15 minutes so that you hope that you let the anger away. Another is to sit and meditate calmly for 15 minutes. Now, you might decide which option is better based on your intuition. Intuition depends on gut feelings, your emotions, and instincts, trusting that these feelings are accurate. I believe we rely on our intuition more than we realize, but we need to understand that it can be flawed because of biases. However, sometimes intuition can be more effective than logical analysis if you are an expert in the field. For example, in certain situations, experienced woodworkers have to rely on intuition when building a wooden chair, and often they are more correct than not. Although I enjoy listening to true crime podcasts, I sometimes have to disagree with the podcasters when they advise listeners to follow their gut feelings if they are in a dangerous situation. However, relying on their gut feelings is not always reliable. Your gut instinct may or may not be accurate unless you are an expert in a particular situation you're in. We also rely on the authority when making decisions. Authority involves trusting figures like parents or experts, but this can be unreliable and inaccurate. Of course, not always, but in many cases, they are inaccurate. Many social media celebrities are spreading false information on the internet, and people trust what these people are saying, including like avoiding vaccines, believing Earth is flat, or that the drinking raw milk is healthy. Although always relying on authority can be dangerous, we can avoid mistakes by checking their credentials. If someone is saying that vaccines cause autism, or recommending drinking raw milk, check if that person has a degree and a training in the medical field. Um, so you may want to use that logic and reasoning to decide if social media celebrities you are following have legit credentials in the field they're talking about online. This rationalism depends on logic and reasoning. However, rationalism can lead to correct uh, conclusions only if you have correct premises and reasoning. Empiricism gains knowledge through observation and experience, but your observation and experience can be biased, or your previous experiences can influence how you perceive events. For example, you try raw milk before and didn't get sick, right? And so you may conclude that based on this experience, raw milk is safe. This conclusion is obviously false. You get sick. It's really bad. Please don't drink raw milk. You were just lucky, actually, if you did not get sick the last time. Um, and the raw milk contains the tons of bacteria such as E. coli, which can kill you. So please don't drink raw milk. So which method of knowing should we choose? We know that our perspective is biased and we are easy to be manipulated. This is why we invented the scientific method. The scientific method involves systematic, careful observation, reasoning, assessing evidence, and testing hypotheses. Scientists do use intuition, authority, rationalism, and empiricism, but they meticulously test claims using scientific methods and use rationalism to draw valid conclusions. Although scientific methods produce reliable conclusions, they are not perfect. Scientific scientific methods can be time consuming because scientists are very careful when answering questions and resources may be limited. Additionally, the scientific method is only applicable to empirical questions. For example, the question of whether or not an afterlife exists cannot be examined using the scientific method because it's not possible to test empirically. Okay, so the next section, understanding science. As a psychology major, I guess you have met people who say that unlike biology, chemistry, and physics, psychology is not a science. They claim that psychology is a pseudoscience. However, the main difference between a field being called a science or not is not about what the subjects it studies, but about the methods used to study those subjects. So no matter what topic you are studying, your field qualifies as science as long as you are using scientific method to explore the natural world. Although this is a simple fact, unfortunately, some people still believe that psychology is not a science. To emphasize that it is, some have started calling psychology psychological science in the past decade or so. And the universities and the colleges in the United States changed the name of the department from the Department of Psychology to the Department of Psychological Science. Actually, my university in Missouri, where I graduated with the bachelor's degree and the master's degree, they changed the name to Department of Psychological Science. So, what are the features of science? The core features of the scientific approach include three key elements. One is systematic empiricism, which involves systematic observation. Scientists carefully develop a research design. They conduct the study and record the data and analyze the results. They use rationalism to come to logical conclusions, but they value actual data. If their previous belief, which is of course based on data, conflicts with the current observation, they will support the current observation. The second aspect of the scientific research is its focus on empirical questions. Science can only test questions that can be empirically investigated. For example, we can test whether women talk more than men. Some people believe that the women talk more than men. Research studies using a portable recording device found that, on average, there was no significant difference in the number of words spoken by men and women. So data shows that there's no significant difference between men and women. An example of a question that cannot be empirically tested is to investigate the existence of afterlife. Some argue that there are cases where people who came back from death described what the afterlife was like, but there is no empirical way to determine whether their experiences were due to hallucinations or some sort while they were alive or not. The best way to study the afterlife would be to, of course, interview the dead, but that's not possible. The last key element is to make the findings public. This is important for two reasons. One is to improve our society by sharing the findings. For example, you guys have used the QR code before, right? This QR code was actually developed by a Japanese employee of a company related to Toyota in the 1990s. Um, and this part is really remarkable. Instead of selling this new technology, he gave it away to the public for free. Today, we see the QR code everywhere in the world because of its easy of use, but we would not have benefit from it if it weren't free to use. Another reason, another reason why sharing findings in public is important is to invite others to review and improve them by correcting errors. Scientists are humans, so they can make mistakes, but by collectively examining the findings, we can critique each other to advance science together as a society. Now, one day, a group of scientists wanted to see if they could replicate a famous or interesting psychological study. So they decided to pick one study and copied everything from the original research paper in the method section, including the experimental research design and how data are collected. Interestingly, even though they copied every single detail from the original paper, and they tried to replicate, but they were unable to replicate some of the classic study findings. It's not just the one, but there are several classic studies that they were unable to replicate. One of such projects is called the Mini Labs Replication Project. This project illustrates the self-correcting nature of science. Now, let's examine one example. Researchers discovered that washing hands made participants view morally wrong activities as less unacceptable. The study's findings are fascinating, obviously, and surprising. It's really surprising because it is suggested that you feel less disgusted about morally wrong activities if you simply wash your hands. However, the many labs team was unable to replicate its original finding, even though they meticulously copied the original study's research design and data collection. The reason that the original study supports this washing effect may be due to the small sample size. Now, this part is important. Although it is ideal to have the larger sample size in your experiment, it's not always necessary in a research study. If the sample accurately represents the population, size doesn't really matter. However, it's also true that in general, having a bigger sample size is usually better than having a small one. Now, earlier we discussed some people's claims that psychology is a pseudoscience, right? The pseudoscience means false science, the fake science involving activities and beliefs shaped by non-scientific or made-up methods. Unlike pseudoscience, scientific claims must be falsifiable or disprovable. Now, unfortunately, some people mistake pseudoscience for real science because they lack an understanding of how scientific methods work. While these individuals are often less educated, some who believe in pseudoscience have actually earned higher degrees. So this is kind of scary. And there are many possible reasons for their beliefs, but one explanation might be the language scientists use. When scientists are asked to explain a scientific theory, they say, "We believe this theory is true." They use the word believe. What's important to understand about this statement is that when scientists say they believe something, it does not mean that they believe it without evidence. Instead, they believe it's true because there is a large amount of data from multiple studies supporting the theory. It's not just a few studies, it's multiple studies. Another point is that the term theory. In science, a theory is a comprehensive explanation supported by a large body of scientific findings, right? But in everyday conversation, the term theory is often a simple idea that is basically a simple guess with little or no support from any empirical research findings. When non-scientists hear scientists talking about a scientific theory or just a theory, they misinterpret it as them talking about a simple guess or just an idea without any data. So, why are we talking about pseudoscience? Why should we care about it? There are three reasons, according to textbook authors. One is that it improves understanding of science's core features and importance. Pseudoscience does not care about careful observation or rationalism, but these features are the core of science. But more importantly, pseudoscience can cause serious harm, such as avoiding vaccination due to irrational fear or consuming raw milk without seriously considering the deadly side effects of it. Lastly, studying pseudoscience is actually the good study material for psychology students, as they should be able to clearly differentiate science from pseudoscience. Now, the textbook authors mentioned an online dictionary called the Skeptics Dictionary, and it includes a number of fascinating items such as cryptozoology. And this is supposedly a study of some weird creatures like Bigfoot and chupacabra. Cabra. Homeopathy is another example. It attempts to treat medical conditions by giving natural substances that are often diluted so much that they may no longer be present. Unfortunately, so-called homeopathic medicines are available at most drugstores. This is very surprising. You can go to a drugstore. Next time you go there, I want you to look for the homeopathy medicine. By the way, don't waste your money because it does not work. All right, next, goal of science. Um, Goal of science, curiosity. Every child is a scientist. This picture was taken when this is my oldest daughter, was about 4 years old. As you can see, my daughter loved to mess with her hair, and a few minutes after this picture was taken, I heard her crying hysterically. She came to my office with the hair clip hanging on her tongue. I told her not to do it because it hurts, obviously, and sent her to her room, right? Now, a few minutes later, she came back to my room with the hair clip hanging on her tongue again. And this is when I told her to wait and grab the camera, and I took several pictures before saving her from the pain. But guess what? She did the same thing one more time. This is obviously super funny. But at the same time, what she was doing depicts the scientific process. First, she had a research question. What would happen if I put this hair clip on my tongue? And she formed a hypothesis thinking it would be fun, right? And she made a prediction what would happen. I think she did not, I don't think she thought that it's going to hurt that bad. And then she designed a study which was to put it on the tip of her tongue. And now it's time to collect and analyze data. The results was the pain. However, she did not stop there. She decided to replicate the study to see if she could observe the same results. And she actually did for 3 times. She was successfully able to replicate the original findings. No, now, I was fortunate enough to capture a similar experiment that my other kid conducted, so naturally I had to take pictures before helping him. This is my youngest child, who was about 4 years old at that time, who decided to insert a necklace, a chain necklace, between his front teeth. And he realized that he could not get it out. Unlike my older child, she did not try to replicate the study. It's possible that the result was significant enough that he did not see the need for replication. Now, I have a middle child, and I wanted to share her research study, but I was unable to find good pictures at this time. Now, I bet everyone has conducted experiments similar to what my kids did. Your parents might have yelled at you for doing something dumb, but when we were kids, we thought like scientists. Our actions and behaviors were driven by curiosity, and we could not resist testing our hypotheses. Now, unfortunately, though, many of us stopped thinking like scientists. I believe we should all start thinking like scientists again because the scientific method is the only process we have invented to expand our knowledge. So let's put the hair clip on our tongue and insert the chain necklace between our teeth and see what happens. All right, now let's discuss the broader purposes of scientific research in psychology. There are three goals of science. The first one is to describe through careful observation. Our primary goal is to observe phenomena through careful systematic observation. The second goal of science is to predict behaviors that occur in the future by observing consistent associations between behaviors or events. Finally, the third goal is to explain behaviors by identifying the cause of such behaviors. From the introduction course, you may remember Freud's psychodynamic theory. You guys remember that? His theory is largely dismissed today, but do you know why? The reason is that his focus is on looking at past behaviors and finding reasonable explanations for current psychological issues. With his theory, you can describe specific behaviors and explain why these behaviors occur. However, his theory won't let you predict future behaviors. His theories were eventually mostly abandoned because most, if not all, scientific findings could not support them. Now, having said that, it's true that there are still practitioners like clinical psychologists and counseling psychologists who study and use Freud's psychodynamic theories, and some research studies have found support for them. So I would say that it's not completely abandoned. Next, let's examine the difference between basic and applied research. Basic research in psychology seeks a deeper and more precise understanding of human behavior without concentrating heavily on practical use. For example, researchers might explore how faces are perceived, whether as a complete object or as a collection of individual facial features. Applied research, on the other hand, focuses more on real world issues. For example, they may investigate an effective way to analyze faces so that the data can be used to identify individuals. Imagine you are on the federal government budget committee deciding which type of research to cut funding for, right? So one is the basic research, the other is applied research. The general public might think cutting basic research is acceptable since its findings don't directly impact daily life, unlike applied research, right? However, applied research depends on discoveries from basic research. So, is basic research more important? Not necessarily. The researchers conduct basic studies without knowing it, their results will eventually improve our lives. So here's an example. Einstein proposed the special theory of relativity, which states that clock moves slower if it's traveling faster. Without this theory, GPS technology would not exist, since satellites moving fast around the Earth need relativistic corrections to provide accurate location data. But the thing is that the Einstein probably did not think about the GPS system when he was active as a researcher. Well, he's dead already, but his work made it possible, right? This example shows that both basic and applied research are essential for progress. All right. Next, science and common sense. Some individuals, including those who consider psychology pseudoscience, might argue that psychology is unnecessary because we have common sense, right? The issue is that, though, the common sense or intuition does not always lead us to the truth. For instance, earlier we discussed how to let the anger go. And one method is to punch a bag for 15 minutes, while another is to sit quietly and meditate for the same period. Scientific research has shown that punching a bag not only fails to calm anger, but can actually increase it, whereas meditation tends to decrease anger. Another example is the belief that physical torture yields confessions. However, studies demonstrate it often results in false confessions. In a textbook, they briefly mention several myths of psychology from a book called Great Myths of Psychology. This is actually a textbook for my course, Myths of Psychology. And I teach this one once a year, so please enroll if you are interested. When we make decisions, we don't always use the methods that are guaranteed to be accurate because these methods can be time consuming or require lots of energy. Instead, we prefer to use shortcuts such as heuristics. A heuristic is a practical rule of thumb that generally helps solve problems, though it isn't always perfect. For instance, if you're asked in a class to estimate, like maybe a class discussion, um, to estimate whether violent crime in the United States is rising or falling, you might recall a social media post from the day before highlighting a high violent crime rate in the past 3 months, right? Now, since this post is still fresh in your memory, you might conclude that violence is increasing. This is an example of the availability heuristic. Although data show that the violent crime has been significantly decreasing in the United States over the past 100 years, the availability heuristic can lead to wrong judgments, causing you to overlook the statistical reality. When seeking an answer, most people search the internet and find information that supports their existing beliefs. However, it is equally important to look for information that contradicts those beliefs. Unfortunately, many are quick to be satisfied once they find a single source confirming their view, a tendency known as confirmation bias. Often, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, scientists also fall into this trap. This is why publishing findings publicly is crucial, so other experts can review and verify their legitimacy. Skepticism is an attitude that all scientists develop as we are aware of our potential bias. However, being skeptical does not mean being cynical or distrustful. Nor does it require doubting every belief or the claim encountered. Instead, it involves taking a moment to evaluate alternative views and seeking evidence, particularly systematically collected empirical data whenever the situation allows it. Scientists understand that they cannot know everything, so it's acceptable to admit that they don't know. You can just say, I don't know if you don't know, if you don't have the sufficient data. However, humans, including, of course, scientists, tend to overestimate their expertise in unfamiliar fields. For example, two medical doctors claimed we should avoid COVID vaccines. Although both were licensed physicians, neither was an immunologist or vaccine specialist. Their confidence in their knowledge in their own specialty let them believe they were experts in areas beyond their expertise. Despite being physicians, not scientists, they should not have claimed knowledge they did not possess. Both physicians lost their medical licenses due to their irresponsible actions. Okay, next section, experimental and clinical psychologists. Experimental psychologist. Uh, the psychology research is mainly carried out by individuals holding PhD or master's degree in psychology and related fields, frequently supported by research assistants with bachelor's degree. Some work for government agencies, national organizations, nonprofits, or private companies. Most experimental psychologists are university faculty who collaborate with students. While some are licensed clinicians, which I don't know if there are any that I know personally. The majority focus on subfields such as behavior neuroscience, cognition, developmental, personality, or social psychology, as well as child or evolutionary psychology. Researchers may work full-time or combine research with teaching and service commitments. Many pursue research for personal intellectual growth and to expand knowledge of human behavior. You might find value in being a research assistant or a participant. So if you are interested, I encourage you guys to contact professors. Even if research is not your area, understanding its purpose, benefits, limitations, and real-world uses can enhance your understanding of psychology and also make better decisions in daily life. Unlike experimental psychologists, clinical psychologists are practitioners who diagnose, develop, and administer treatments for their clients. Now, some believe that the clinical psychology field, has overlooked scientific research and requires more rigorous training and evaluation, while others think these concerns are overstated. Both sides agree that a scientific approach is essential for accurate diagnosis and effective treatment, and clinicians must be scientifically literate to assess research and base their decisions on the best evidence. Now, textbook authors listed several empirically supported treatments such as ACT and CBT. Now, one reason, however, why clinical psychologists are criticized is that some of these practitioners still use assessments and treatment techniques that lack substantial scientific support, such as the Rorschach ink blot test or psychodynamic therapy. If you want to become a clinical psychologist and are not a big fan of conducting research, you still need to be able to read and understand the scientific studies. Okay, this is the last section, which we're not going to cover in this video. All right, so that's the end of chapter 1.